Scribe and Black Press presents an unabridged recording of Roughin' It, a tale of We the Immortals by Luke Warfield. Read aloud by Luke Warfield. Copyright Luke Warfield. All rights reserved. Preface. The following story was attributed to a one Ignatius Holt and published by Yardley Trout Press, a producer of youth dime novels in the latter years of the Unician epoch. The tale was part of a collection of moralistic frontier adventures about greatness grand by Holt, who was accused of being one and the same person, writing pseudonymously to puff up his own legend in the eyes of children. I, Luke Warfield, the finder and translator of We the Immortals, can neither confirm nor deny whether the accusations were true. This text, written in the first person, was originally published in complete Nembryland vernacular. While I have preserved its parlance and dialogue, I have modified the narrative portions to standard English for clarity. Everything else has been preserved as is. Epigraphs. Their hands, teeth, knees, head, and feet are their weapons, not only boxing with their fists, but also tearing, kicking, scratching, biting, gouging each other's eyes out by a dexterous use of a thumb and finger, and doing their utmost to kill each other, even when rolling over one another on the ground. F-coming, sketches of a tour. In most cases, both parties were severely bruised, bitten, and gouged, and would be weeks in recovering. It was a brutal but not fatal mode of combat. Peter H. Burnett, Recollections and Opinions of an Old Pioneer. "Gouge him! Gouge him!" exclaimed a dozen voices. George D. Prentice in The Northern Watchman. There's a great deal of talk about getting up expresses in these days, and the varmints think they are doing a great deal when they send a man to travel in steamboats and cars to carry their news. Davy Crockett would be ashamed to send anybody else to do his errands. When I get out my express, the news come directly from Mexico to Washington, and I shall bring no news but what I've seed with my own eyes. When I see the news, I know it's true, and then if any human has the impudence to dispute the truth of my news, I've nothing to do but take a twist in his hair and put his eye in my pocket. From Davy Crockett's Almanac, 1847. "George," said his father, "do you know who killed that beautiful little cherry tree yonder in the garden?" This was a tough question, and George staggered under it for a moment, but quickly recovered himself, and looking at his father, with the sweet face of youth brightened with the inexpressible charm of all-conquering truth, he bravely cried out, "I can't tell a lie, Pa. You know I can't tell a lie. I did cut it with my hatchet." Mason Locke Weems, The Life of Washington. And now, Roughin' It. Part 1. This here's a tale of blood. It concerns the likes of Mr. Greatness Grand, though one I suppose he's too modest to tell. After all, it was left out of that fancy book he wrote. But I remember. Reckon we all do, up here in Dish County. And it's true. I told him not to do it. Dashed near begged. But he ain't listened to nobody. That's how he was back then, stubborn as an axe-handle hound. Old Grandy, as we knowed him, was tacking up his mule that morn, the day it happened, and I caught him right before he gone out to do the deed. "Grandy," I said, "you ain't need to carry on like this. It ain't right anyway." "These folks'll never take me serious less I do," Grandy said back. "And they only understand one way around here. Honor demands it. 'Sides, it'd be wrong not to." He cinched the latigos and flung the saddlebags over and wiped his nose and tilted his head like he was trying to remember something important. Peaches, Grandy's mule, huffed and tossed her head as if agreeing with all he just said, or maybe with what I said. I couldn't rightly figure. But Angel Eyes, perdition, why him? "Because he's the biggest one. I take him down, ain't nobody got dash to say to me no more." "He'll kill ye." "That remains to be seen." "He's 3 times your size. Lived in these here hills his whole life. Been in more tumbles than you've taken dashes." But like I said, Grandy ain't heard none of it. When Grandy had it in mind to do something, he did it, and not a multitude of devils or pretty women could turn him one way or the other. Grandy mounted the mule and looked down the road, and boy was he a sight, like one of them paintings hanged up in a rich man's house. From top to bottom, Grandy was rigged out in buckskin. He wore a felt hat banded with hemp, and around his waist a possible's belt and knife wider than my own hand and twice as long. Grandy's face was a lot prettier then, too, since he ain't had none of them scars he come to later. His chin was covered in thick fur, black as cooled magma and cropped in the trembler style, eyes blacker yet, shining like moonbeams rippling on lake water at night. I'll never forget that image, not so long as I live, for it was the last time I thought I'd see the young greenhorn above ground. I'll go down with ye, I told him, and after hopping on my Rocky, we set out for town. We made town an hour later. It was still early, though the sky portended a hazy and humid day for the good people of Salt Lick. Trillium, the nice kind, spiced the air and feather brush sweetened it, and bugs of all flying varieties zipped past our ears and noses, eager to get on with the day's work. It was that time of the year, the yellow snow season, as we call it, with nearly every bush and bramble in there flowering, much to the view and pleasure of housewives and the annoyance of anyone prone to the hay fever, myself being one of the latter. Like the bugs, most folks was still minding their chores when we arrived, but there was a few around town already. Grandy and I rode up through the strip of shops, which weren't much because there's only 3 of them in Salt Lick. There was Ernest Smith's General Store and Saloon, Ern's Smithy, owned by the same feller, but run by his brother-in-law, Jelly Cooper, and the livery on the other side of the road, Gaff Shipman being the proprietor and a relative of mine. That's where we was headin', Ern's Saloon, and already a few hosses stood hitched out front. Devil, the big brown fox trotter at the end, belonged to the one and same feller old Grandy come to see, Angel Eyes Tanner. I'll get to why everyone called him Angel Eyes later. First, let me keep on with how things went. We pulled up to the saloon and dismounted our juments and hitched them to what was left of the hitchin' bar and climbed the front steps. The outside of Ern's looked like a house, only it just warn't no house, though the upstairs had some rooms where Ern and his family lived, and there was a closet bed they rented out to outliers who come to Salt Lick on journeys far and away. But the bottom floor, that was pure mercantile, and a decent space for it, too. One side of the floor was all store, the other all saloon. The saloon side had a high bar, darkly stained, and all kinds of old jars lined up along the back wall, brimming with spirits. Ern's didn't have no mirror like them fancy saloons you hear about in New Fiorin or sich like, but for Salt Lick it might as well have been the smartest place in Dish County, and it's true. The tables were all empty save one, occupied by the same fellers whose hosses was hitched outside. We knew every single one of 'em, and they was all eatin' and jawin' and laughin', none of which we understood nor cared about when we strode up on 'em. The men were as follows: Hap Glover, Ledge Ward, Mav Sexton, and Angel Eyes Tanner. All mean, hard, mountain-dwelling monsters of varying sizes and degrees, but none more than that old iron-chewing son of a dash, Angel Eyes. Angel Eyes Tanner was as big as he was mean, and he was as mean as a hodag in the summertime swelter. A mountain man's mountain man, with muscles as hard as granite and a will like anviled steel. Now, as I alluded to before, the reason we all called Angel Eyes was on account of, well, his eyes. See, Angel Eyes was a quadroon by blood, his grandma on his mother's side being full Nembry, which made him like I said afore. Everything about Angel Eyes looked human on the outside, skin, hair, nose, everything except that one thing everyone noticed. Angel Eyes' eyes were so green and striking, they seized a body head to toe like the way kudzu vines climb up a pine tree and strangle it to death. It was the kind of earthly pigmentation only nature itself could produce. The kind that touched all a feller's senses, even smell. Take one look, and suddenly you found yourself catching whiffs of upturned loam. If it weren't for those eyes, I reckon he'd have passed for full human like you or me, although his blood would still shine as all raw broadses does. There ain't no hiding that. "Angel Eyes!" Grandy shouted, his own eyes fixed on the big man like he wanted to eat his flesh raw and chase it down with blood and chicory. "By the code, I come to challenge ye!" But the men kept on, and Angel Eyes himself called for Ledge to cut cards for a game. Ain't none of them acknowledged Grandy or his call-out. "Ain't ye heard me?" Grandy said. "I'm here to show all of ye who I am." "Now come on, Mr. Grand," said Ern from behind the bar. "Ain't nobody wants no trouble. Come here and get yourself something to eat on the house." "Keep quiet, Ern. This don't concern ye." But still, Angel Eyes ain't acknowledged Grandy or nothing. He just kept on jawing and laughing, like the greenhorn warn't even there. I know you hear me, raw broad. At hearing the appellation, Angel Eyes looked up, though he was still smiling and jovial. What's wrong with you, young blood? Go on, get. You've ragged on me for the last time. Grandy was seething now, his face as red as a rhubarb. Son, there ain't no cause to be angry, Mav Sexton interrupted. We was just funning with you. Nothing meant by it. Now do as Ern says, and come back here and get in on the game. But now Grandy was incensed beyond what words could convey. For the more them fellers tried to placate him, the crazier he became, until he was so mad he did something that blew the whole situation up like a glycerin barrel in a quake. With a sweep of his hand, Grandy knocked Angel Eyes' breakfast off the table and right into his lap, coffee, casserole, and all. The man let out a shout and jumped up, and when the tin plate and cup hit the ground with a loud clang, everyone looking on fell silent as if stricken deaf and dumb by the matron of death herself. We couldn't believe it, but it happened. And that's when they all saw there was no reasoning with the young greatness grand. The only way forward was through, and the only way through was blood. So you're dead set on a tumble with death, is ye? Said Angel Eyes. He was glaring at Grandy now, and tapping his big thumb claw on the tabletop, the one he growed out long and tempered with fire for occasions such as this. I reckon I ain't, but with ye. Now, fellers, Ern cried out. But whatever it was he said after was drowned out by the sound of Angel Eyes' chair sliding back, the man towering up to his full height like some squatch slave ready to whoop up on his master and run away. Angel Eyes was at least 2 heads taller and 2 bodies wider than the greenhorn, a right behemoth with dish plate hands and a beard so bushy it was a wonder he warn't never mistook for no fugitive chattel. Take it outside at least 70's grace. Ain't you worry none, Ern, said Angel Eyes. We'll do just that. But you're come on out with us and serve as umpire. Let's go, young blood. I aim to sew this up quick. And so to Ern's pleas we obliged, and to Angel Eyes' request Ern obliged, and everyone cleared out of the saloon and into the street. As keeping with the rules of rough and tumbling, the 2 combatants immediately began taking off their moccasins, shirts, and belts, and they handed over their weapons to their seconds. I was Grandy's second, so he gave his possibles to me. Ain't you scared? I said to him. Scared of what? Dying? Who says I'm dying? Grandy, let's just quit this. It ain't too late. You just guard them possibles, here? And that was all he said, and there weren't no convincing him no other way other than his way. And it's true. I stood by helpless as Grandy and Angel Eyes squared up with each other, nothing but Ern between them, whom Angel Eyes had obliged to recite the code for all to hear afore they got to tearing each other's eyeballs out. A crowd was gathering now, folks who'd come to town on one errand or another and didn't reckon they'd be getting themselves a bloody show of combat for their troubles. There was a lot of curious chatter and questions, especially as to the cause for what it was they was about to see. But all I said to those who asked was that Grandy and Angel Eyes had themselves a disagreement, and then I told them to hush because Ern was about to go over the rules. All right, y'all listen here, Ern said. I'm saying this so as all y'all can bear witness. Ye men agree to this here duel according to the rough and tumble, yea or nay? Yay, the combatants said. All right. Then y'all know anything goes except the use of weapons. When someone cries out quits or falls unconscious, the duel's over. Yay. All right. Break the rules and you'll lose the duel, and all protection against the feud is forfeit. You understand? Yay. All right. And will ye people hold these men to their agreements? Yay! The people shouted, me included, and there was a newfound enthusiasm boiling up amongst all in attendance. In truth, the air was so thick with it, it could have been rolled and baked into a cake. Wall, all right, was all Ern said, and then he said no more, and walked back to his store, and sat down on the porch, and the fight was on.